Shalom, everybody. Welcome back. This week, outside Israel, we are going to read the double portion, Chukas and Balak. Both are actually full portions. The portion of Chukas has 3 mitzvahs, by the way, all positive commandments, and they are related to the chok, the para aduma, the red heifer, and the laws of spiritual impurity for touching a dead body. The Torah starts by saying, Zois chukas haTorah. This is the statute of the Torah, the law without rationale. You know, the Torah is made up of 3 different types of laws. One is mishpatim, which are ethical laws, like, for example, honor your parents, don't steal, don't murder. All those mitzvahs, says the Gemara, even if the God would not have commanded us, we would understand them ourselves. They are ethical laws. They are the laws upon which all society runs. The second is edus. Edus are testimonial, like Shabbos, Yom Tov. It's a testimony that God created the world in 6 days, that God took us out of Egypt. The mezuzah, the tzitzis, tefillin, they are all testimonials about something. And the third section is what we have here called the chukim, the statutes. And those are laws that even once they are explained to us, we still don't understand them. And the law talking about here is that a person who came into contact with a dead individual, either under a roof or coming into actual contact, even though it's a mitzvah to bury the dead, but they become tamei, spiritually impure. Today, it makes no practical difference, but in the days of the temple, they were not allowed to enter the temple. Say they couldn't even bring the paschal sacrifice until they counted pure days. They counted a week, and on the 3rd day of the week and the 7th day of the week, they had what is called a red heifer, a red calf. It had to be completely red. They shechted it outside the temple area. This was the only sacrifice, so to say, that took place outside the temple area. And then they took the entire thing and they burnt it to ashes. And then they took those ashes and mixed it with few ingredients, including mayim chaim, some living water. And the Kohen, the priest, had to sprinkle it on those people who were tamei, spiritually impure, as I said, on the 3rd day and the 7th day. And after the 7th day, they went to the mikveh and they became pure and were able to go to the temple to bring sacrifices, etc. Now, why this made people pure is beyond our understanding. There's a symbol that it has to do with the golden calf, and which is also kind of a red. But the interesting thing is it made the impure pure, whereas the Kohen who sprinkled it, he himself became impure until that night, and then he went to the mikveh and became pure again. And so the book points out that who were the ones who purified the person who was tamei by sprinkling the ashes of the red heifer? It was the holiest and purest people of the nation. It was the Kohen, which tells us that everybody, even a Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash, has to use his influence to help people, even the lowest people. And by teaching them and living as an inspiring example of a true servant of God, those people will in turn become positively influenced, uplifted, and purified. Now, it is true. You have to be careful, because sometimes reaching out to people who are on a less elevated level can be dangerous, because instead of us influencing them, we may become influenced ourselves and dragged down. How do you make sure that you are not influenced by them, but you be the influencer? It is by maintaining a constant connection to God and to the tzaddikim who keep you in line. And then you won't forget your mission. And although it is risky, we must still lower ourselves like the Kohanim and reach out to those who are less connected to Yiddishkeit. And in that way, we will be able to have the influence. That is what the Rebbe taught with his shluchim. There were many great Jewish leaders who the Lubavitcher Rebbe's invited to become involved with this type of holy work of sending out emissaries out into the world to spread Yiddishkeit. And the other leaders answered to the Rebbe, it is too dangerous, because perhaps you send out a young couple to a community. Who says that that young couple and their children, instead of being the influencers, there's so few of them, they'll be influenced. And they were afraid to do it. The Rebbe said, as long as we stay connected to the source, to our Rebbe, we don't have to worry. And that is, in fact, what happened. Beautiful story. And they bring here a very famous story that the Rebbe used to often quote. And that is in Premishlan, a city where the famous Reb Meir Premishlan was a Rebbe. It was extremely cold. And from the village where the huts were to the mikveh was a very steep hill. And that hill was full of ice. And every day, two enlightened people who didn't believe too much in all these things saw the elderly Rebbe Reb Meir Premishlan confidently walk down that icy hill to the mikveh. Just walk down the ice, go to the mikveh, and then walk back up. And it was amazing. But these guys were not great believers. So they laughed. Everyone was impressed. They said, that can't be a big deal. If an old man like him can do it, we can do it too. Nothing special about it. And so they wanted to prove to everyone that they can do it too. And they attempted the climb, but they didn't get far. Have you ever walked on ice? I lived in Montreal, New York. There's black ice there. You go on that, boy, and boy, kaput. You go slipping down, and that's what happened to them. They continued to walk. They just smattered themselves down the hill. And Reb Meir calmly walked down as if it was a dry and sure path. And so they asked him, how are you able to walk down this ice when we are not able? We fall. And Reb Meir answered in Yiddish, wenn man is gebunden eben, fällt man nicht herab unten. When a person is connected to above, you don't fall below. This was a message for life. When your mind and heart are strongly connected to God, then even if you find yourself in the most slippery, spiritually dangerous places, you will not fall. And that is the same with the Para Aduma. As long as we remain connected to our Rebbe, we don't have to worry about it. Now, interestingly enough, Chukas, after the story of Para Aduma, which was given when all the laws of the Torah were given, so that's in the first 2 years, the Torah has a gap, which it doesn't really speak about, except in the journeys of 38 years. It jumps to the 40th year in this portion. Doesn't tell you it's jumping, it just does. And it goes to the first month of the 40th year when the great Miriam, the older sister of Moshe and Aaron, pass away. Now, that is, as I said, in the month of Nisan of the 40th year. We all know that 3 great miracles happened to the Jews in the desert. They had the water with the miraculous well. They had the manna, the daily food that rained from heaven, and they had the spiritual clouds. And we are taught that it was in the merit of these 3 great tzaddikim. The well of Miriam, it is called, came as a result of Miriam. The manna came as a result of Moshe's honor, and the clouds came as a result of Aaron's honor. And so we read that when Miriam passed away in this portion, and it's put right next to the red heifer, says Rashi, because just like the red heifer brings atonement, in the same way, the death of tzaddikim bring atonement. But as a result of Miriam's passing, those holy, that miraculous water stopped. And the Jews cried out, we have no water for our children, for our animals, for anyone. And here we now know that you have to feed your animals first. And here's where the terrible sin, which we're not sure exactly what it is, there's many different opinions, takes place. God tells Moshe and Aaron to go to that rock and speak to the rock, and it'll give water. Many different opinions as to exactly what happened, but Rashi says that instead of speaking to the rock, Moshe hit the rock, similar to what he was commanded to do 40 years earlier when he brought the water. And God says, because you have failed to sanctify my name, whatever that means, it has been decreed that Aaron and Moshe will not go in to Israel. And so we read about Miriam's death. Then we read that on the 1st of Av, 5 months later, Aaron will pass away, and then the clouds will stop also, and there'll be the attacks, as we read at the end of the portion, with Sichon and Og. But because of Moshe, everything came back. There was the well that came back, and the clouds eventually came back. But we read that Aaron passes away. And the book points out, as the Chumash says, that when Aaron passed away, Vayifku Kol Yisrael, the entire Jewish people mourned Aaron for 30 days. And Rashi points out that when Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, we read that the men of Israel mourned him. When Aaron passes away, we read the entire nation of Israel mourned him. What is the difference? That Aaron was the only one who was mourned by the entire nation, men and women. They loved him tremendously. And not just because he was Moshe Rabbeinu's brother, and not just because he was the Kohen Gadol, who was the high priest, but rather, Aaron, says the Mishnah, was Ohev Shalom, Roidev Shalom. He loved peace and he pursued peace. he had his ear to the ground. He knew what was happening around him. And when he heard that two friends had a faribble and weren't talking to each other, he knew how the implications and the consequences of that. It can go down the generations. When he heard of a strife between a husband and a wife, and he understood the implications, it didn't matter. He would go out of his way and do everything he could to reconcile them. He was even ready to stretch the truth, we are told. And that is, he knew that these guys are friends and their ego is standing in the way. So he would run to one of them and say, I met this guy and he asked me to apologize. He went to the other one and he said the same thing. Now that wasn't true. But he learned from God that you are able to do that. God did that with Abraham and Sarah. We don't have enough time to go into the whole story. But he understood that we have to create peace, even if it's not exactly the truth. Many people you meet who start fightables and say, I'm just telling the truth. I have to tell the truth. Aaron says you don't. But the Rambam says in Halacha, in his halachic book, as a whole pathway for the Jewish people, Gadol HaShalom, remember one thing, peace is the greatest thing on earth. The whole reason the Torah was given is primary purpose is to create peace in the world. As it says, the ways of Torah are pleasant. Shalom. All its paths are peace. That's what the Torah wants of us. And the Mishnah tells us, God found no better way for people to receive his blessings than being at peace with one another. Even if you feel justified in complaining about something, fighting for your rights, it's the principle, you say. We are told that peace is a loftier goal, and we should choose peace over being right. Like Aaron HaKohen, who was Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom. But even so, when we love peace, the Rebbe says, we cannot compromise. We have to bring them close to the Torah, not the Torah close to them. And everything we should do should be for peace. In fact, says the Rambam, that if it comes Hanukkah, falls out on Shabbos, and you have enough money to buy Hanukkah candles or Shabbos candles, but not both. Or for that matter, you have enough money on a Shabbos to either buy wine for Kiddush or Shabbos candles, but not both. Which takes precedence over the other? It is buying the Shabbos candles. Why? Because Shabbos candles increases peace in the home, which is the purpose of the whole Torah. And he brings here a story of the famous Sage Rabbi Meir, who used to give lectures on Friday night that were attended by many people, to men and women, it seems. And amongst them was a woman who was so taken by Rabbi Meir Shia that she lost track of time. And she came home late, and her husband was furious. And when he heard the reason, he said to Rab Meir, you have one of two choices. Either go now and spit in Rab Meir's face, he told his wife, or you're getting a divorce. She didn't know what to do. She went to Rab Meir. And when he saw her, Rab Meir understood what happened. And he started to squeeze his eye, complaining. He says, I got something cut in my eye. I don't know what to do about it. And he saw the woman. He said, do me a favor, spit in my eye 7 times. That will clear it. She didn't want to, but he insisted that she did until she did do it. And then Abner said, go home and make peace with your husband. Tell him, he only asked you to spit in my face once, and you did it 7 times. When she left, the students turned to Abner and said, you can't do that. Maybe you feel you can, but you are the head sage, you're the Rosh Yeshiva. It is not just yourself that you have to worry about, it's your whole position. How can you disrespect the spirit, the seat of Rosh Yeshiva by letting her do it? And he said, am I less than Aaron HaKohen? Am I less than God? God, when it comes to the Seder, he says, erase my name to create peace between husband and wife. That's how important it is. The second portion we read is the portion of Balak, where after the Jews conquer Sichon and Og, the Balak, the king of Moab, is very afraid that the Jews will conquer him. And so he goes to hire Bilam to curse the Jewish people. Bilam, believe it or not, was a non-Jewish prophet who had tremendous power. And God says that Rashi says that God gave him those powers for whatever reason. They were both terrible anti-Semites. I want to point out that of the entire Torah, Balak is unique because everything that happens in the Torah that the Torah discusses happened to the Jewish people of that generation or before. Like the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, those were handed down. But everything happened to the Jewish people except for this portion. This portion happens between Bilam and Balak. How do we even know it? It's like we have a hidden camera watching them. And it was all told prophetically by God to Moshe Rabbeinu to learn. And here we have the famous story of Bilam's donkey, him talking to the donkey. And we have, in fact, the greatest prophecies of the whole Torah. It is from our enemy, Bilam, who God transforms, instead of cursing, to bless the Jewish people. The story of Mashiach coming. Where is those prophecies of Mashiach arriving and the saving of the Jewish people and the end of times? It is in this portion. And he points out here that when Bilam was compelled by God to bless the Jewish people instead of cursing them, he compares us to the dust of the earth. And this, in fact, is a compliment. As the Hayom Yom written by the Rebbe says, that even the wisest minds are incapable of understanding the depths of the natural treasures and resources that God hid in the ground. There's oil, there's gold, there's diamonds, beyond anything we can imagine, even lithium. And similarly, Hashem cherished land is the Jewish people, and each one of us is like earth, contains immeasurable treasures and reserves of spiritual power. Now, most treasures and wealth reserves are buried deep underground, require intensive digging to extract them. A Jew's most precious treasure, our soul, is buried deep within the body and our psyche. You have to work on ourselves to remove the dirt that accumulates as a result of our faults in order to reveal the neshama in all its shining glory. Yes, the earth contains concealed precious minerals like silver and gold. In every one of us, there's untold wealth and fortune. We have to search for those qualities, sifting through imperfections and challenges until they are revealed. And the same in every single person we meet. There are treasures buried. By being a positive mindset with them, we can discover those hidden treasures, allowing ourselves and our friends. Now, it's very interesting. He points out here that when Bilam was riding his donkey on the way to curse the Jewish people, and God didn't want him to, and the donkey stopped, and because God had sent an angel, and only the donkey was able to see it. It's a whole story, but Hashem allowed the donkey to talk with Bilam, whether it's prophetically or whatever way. The donkey didn't explain that he wasn't going forward because of the angel, because Bilam would have been embarrassed. And he says, God was careful not to embarrass the feelings of a person who is in the middle of an evil deed. Even an enemy of the Jewish people was respected. How much more so must the feelings of every person be taken into account? Even if a person deserves rebuke, do it in such a way that he doesn't feel embarrassed. Do it privately, out of hearing, in a gentle way. And then the message will be given over. And the Gemara says, we should rather allow ourselves to be thrown into a fire than to embarrass a fellow Jew. In fact, the great sage of the Gemara, Mar Ukva, and his wife were being followed by a poor person who wanted to know who was giving their tzedakah. And rather than reveal themselves, they ran into the nearest building, which was a furnace. And so don't allow yourselves to be embarrassed. And he points out, don't embarrass others. And the same thing happened with Joseph. Joseph's brothers tried to kill him. They sold him as a slave. But then when he was revealing to them who he was in Egypt, he didn't want them to be embarrassed, though they had wronged him in such a way. And he cleared the room rather than say it in front of him. The story is told, the great Rabbi Akiva Eger had a poor guest at his table. And somehow he clumsily poured the red wine onto a beautiful white tablecloth. I was so embarrassed. And Rabbi Akiva Eger saw his embarrassment. He spilt his own wine and says, "Oi, we have a rickety table." So he caused further damage to his tablecloth rather than embarrass someone. A very important lesson. My friends, we don't have time to go through these two beautiful portions. I would urge you to do so, especially the portion of Balak and all those amazing blessings that God gives upon us. Let us hope that the time has finally come for those blessings to be revealed, and chief amongst them, the coming of Mashiach, when the entire world and all the nations of the world will be working on revealing godliness, spirituality, and holiness. Shabbat.